So a few years ago, a dear friend of mine invited me to join her for a half-day trapeze class. She was going through sort of a rough time, and she needed to be able to cut loose and have a little fun, and I said, sure, why not? How bad can it be? So we arrived at the open-air trapeze school on the Santa Monica Pier on this glorious California summer day. And there were about 15 of us in the class that day, and so we were given our safety harnesses, and we had a very brief sort of a instruction session down on the ground. From there, we were kind of put into a line, and we were ushered over to the waiting area where we could watch each other fly on the trapeze. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I was last in line, and so I had plenty of time to watch everybody take their turn. And I was fine. It was great. I was fine. I was okay. Right up until the second that I wasn't. And in one blink of an eye type moment, I went from 0 to terrified, just like that. It came on with no warning, and it was this sort of silent terror. So I couldn't even find my voice to speak up and say, no, wait, there's been a mistake. I'm not doing this. I was too scared. And before I could remedy the situation, I was being ushered over to the ladder because it was my turn. And I found myself staring up at the tallest, oldest, most rickety, rusty ladder I've ever seen in my life. I swear to God. And I don't know how or why, but somehow I found myself climbing this ladder. I think I was too terrified not to. I don't know. And there was a bit of drama on the ladder, but somehow I did make it up to the top, where I found myself standing on a platform which was about the size of a postage stamp, staring out over a drop that now seemed to rival that of the Grand Canyon. And I was just this shy of a meltdown. I was totally in my stuff, so to speak. And so they had this wonderful crew, and there was the trapeze guy, is how I refer to him still to this day, and he was on the platform with me. So he reached out with his long hook, and he grabbed the trapeze bar, and he pulled it into us. And it became apparent very quickly that I had even bigger problems on my hands because I couldn't reach the bar because I was too short. And I was like, oh, well, shoot, darn. And he's like, no, it's okay. Here's what I want you to do. He's like, I want you to put your toes over the edge of the platform. He's like, and then I want you to just lean out. And he said, I'm going to hold you. I'm going to hold your harness. And you just lean out and stretch for that bar. And he said, it's okay. Trust me. I've got you. And as soon as he said those words, it hit me. Right then and there, everything came into laser sharp focus for me. Years' worth of issues that I had buried deep down inside came bubbling up to the surface. And I knew instantly and unmistakably that I was in the grip of a fear that was very, very deeply rooted in a complete and total lack of trust. The fear and the lack of trust were about the fact that there was no way that I believed that this guy could hold me as I dangled out over this platform. Fear that the guy on the ground controlling the pulley that was attached to my harness really didn't have me, and that I wasn't okay. And ultimately, a complete lack of trust and faith that the universe truly had me and that I would be all right. Because the fact of the matter is, I hadn't felt all right or okay in a very, very long time. Because okay doesn't feel like being single and alone at 40 years old, right? And okay can't possibly resemble working your tail off for years and doing everything you're supposed to do and doing it right and doing it well and still finding yourself going through not one, but 2 layoffs in the course of a 3-year period with a very long period of unemployment in between. And okay can't possibly be the helplessness that you experience when you're broke and you're broken and you're spent and you're guilt-ridden because you've pretty much run out of options and you've lost the good fight. And okay can't look like the violence and the war and the greed and the abuse and the injustice and all of those horrible things that I was bombarded with every time I stepped out of my door and into the world, the things that I just couldn't look away from. And quite honestly, if those things are okay, then to me, okay looked and felt a lot like despair. And so, as is often the case in my wacky life, of course I had to have this great epiphany while I'm standing up on this platform. staring out into the abyss. And as profound as it was, and it was very profound, I still had a very real problem right in front of me. I couldn't reach the stupid bar. So trapeze guy says, okay, just lean out. And I was like, okay. So I did this. I went. Right, which he said no. And so there was this crazy negotiation that went on up there, and ultimately, after quite a few times of this back and forth, I ultimately did lean out, and I did grab a hold of the bar, and I did step off the platform. And it was horrible, horrible. And I hated every single second of it. And it turned out that letting go of the trapeze bar to fall, gently and softly to the net below was just as terrifying as stepping off the platform was. Horrible. And afterwards, I didn't feel the rush, and I didn't feel a high from having overcome my fears. Quite honestly, I just felt shattered. And I cried all night, and I cried all of the next day, and then I just kept crying, and I couldn't stop. And it was as though I were broken wide open. And for weeks, I walked around like one big, raw, protruding nerve. I jumped at shadows. I was overly sensitive to noises. I felt like there was a part of me that was stuck outside of my body, and not in some cool, transcendental meditation kind of a way. No, it wasn't cool, no. It was more like my soul had been just violently ripped out and was trying to crawl back inside and just couldn't get there. And so during this period, I had these moments of clarity. I really did, where I realized that this innocent little trapeze class really didn't merit this sort of very acute, extreme emotional response from me. I mean, I knew it was completely disproportionate. It didn't make any sense. 15 people that day flew on the trapeze, and 14 of them had the time of their life. And as far as I know, there was only one of us who was sort of curled up in a little ball on the floor of her mind, just completely shattered and unable to shake off this terror. And this was a catalyst for me. It was a catalytic moment, so to speak, because in this one brief shining moment, I realized that all the issues that had been sneaking around in sort of the back of my mind and wreaking havoc on my daily life, they were jolted right up to the surface. They were there in a place where I could no longer ignore them, and where, in fact, now I could really put my finger on them and name them. I was blown away by how deeply rooted my lack of trust and fears had become, and how they had come to kind of take over every aspect of my life. I realized I was tired of living this way, and I needed some help. So I did what every self-respecting woman of the new millennium would do, and I hired a therapist, who I prefer to call mentor, but we're all friends here, so she was a therapist. And after just a few sessions, she drops this bombshell on me, and she says, I think you're suffering from a spiritual crisis. And I said, what? What? I'm sorry. What, a spiritual crisis? What? I mean, can't we just blame my mom? I mean, seriously, right? I'm like 40-something-year-old woman. Isn't that what we do? We blame my mom, and you throw some Xanax at me, and I walk out the door, and we're fine, right? And he was like, no, we're going with spiritual crisis. And I know that I had been mad at God for quite a while, and I knew that. So fortunately, I did have the sense to pay attention and to listen to what she had to say. And she talked to me about the need for community, which I really hadn't had in a very long time. But more importantly, she talked to me about the need for a belief system that was grounded in the idea that no matter what, I would be okay, that the universe really did have me and I would be all right. And I paid attention because I was paying her too much money not to. And so in December of 2012, I had done some research, and I attended my very first service here at VCSL. And I'll never forget that day for many reasons, but it was the Sunday after the horrific events at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, where all those children were murdered. And that Sunday, Reverend Bonnie, she talked about violence, but she didn't dwell on the horrible details of that day. Instead, she invited all of us to consider the violence that we commit upon ourselves on a daily basis. And that rang so true for me. And I was absolutely captivated. And so I came back. And I kept coming back. And now every week at service, I feel like I'm broken wide open all over again. And I'm tempted to bolt every Sunday, to run outside and just be alone with my tears and with whatever is broken loose that particular day. But so far I've managed to stay in my seat. Because this time the broken open part, it doesn't really feel like fear anymore. Now it's starting to feel more like release and healing and like love. And the part of me that wants to bolt every Sunday is overshadowed by the part of me that wants to believe that maybe I really am okay. And maybe this version of okay really is okay. And so I've stayed. And so looking back, I see now that this trapeze class was this crazy, wild, miraculous metaphor for my life. And it was miraculous because of the fact that I'm terrified of heights. And I never should have been there. I shouldn't have gone. But it was because of that woman right back there in the back with the red hair that I was there. And thank God for her, and thank God I was there. Because by taking that class, I learned that I literally had to let go in order to grab a hold of something better. And I had to fall in order to fly. And I was never really in any danger at all. I just needed to believe that I had a safe place to land. And I feel like VCSL is that safe place. And I feel like all of those parts of me that I thought were broken, maybe they're not really broken. In fact, now I like to just think of them as little unincorporated bits that kind of hang out on the periphery, right? And every time I come to service on Sunday, or I take a class, or I engage in the community of this center, I feel like I'm fitting another piece, one of those pieces, into this puzzle that is my crazy, wacky, beautiful life. And I still cry almost every single week when I come. I was crying when we first started today, and I hate that I cry. I hate it. Hate it. But I also don't hate it, because now, more often than not, the tears aren't necessarily a manifestation of some sort of inner turmoil like they used to be. Now the tears are usually in response to like this amazing wonder that I feel by like something that's beautifully said, or a song that's beautifully sung, or an idea or a thought that's gently and thoughtfully shared. And there's just so much of that here. So I sit there usually in the back with my dad, and I take it all in, and I am so moved. And I still don't have all of the answers, and there's still so much that's mysterious to me. But my time here has helped me find my belief in the answers and in their existence. And that's enough. Thank you.